The public farewell and the final resting place. Details are revealed of the Pope's funeral. The service will take place at the Vatican this Saturday with a public mass in St. Peter's Square. Pope Francis will lie in state for 3 days so the faithful can pay their respects to a man so loved by many for his humility and humanity.
He's a man of prayer and he's a humble man, very humble.
He really believed in what he has done, in what he was doing.
The Prince of Wales will attend the funeral alongside Sir Keir Starmer, President Trump and President Zelensky. World leaders gathering to honour the leader of 1.3 billion Catholics, also tonight. Here, confirmation from the Prime Minister. Trans women are not women, but his support of the Supreme Court's ruling could cause problems for the PM and his party. A sober warning from the International Monetary Fund. Trump's trade wars dealt a blow to the world economy and everyone will suffer. And
you like beans on toast? Yeah, would you like butter?
Up bright and early for the government's new breakfast clubs, but who is going to foot the bill?
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. The Pope is lying at rest in his former residence inside the Vatican tonight as more details emerged of his final moments. Vatican sources said Pope Francis awoke early yesterday morning and later suffered a fatal stroke and fell into a coma. Tomorrow, a ceremony will see his coffin taken to St. Peter's Basilica, where he will lie in state for 3 days. His funeral will be held on Saturday with world leaders, including President Donald Trump, attending. Prince William will be there on behalf of the King. This is the scene in St. Peter's Square tonight. More than 100,000 Catholics are set to pay their respects over the coming days. From the Vatican, here's our Europe editor, James Mates.
Flanked by the uniformed Swiss guards who attended him in life and now in death, the body of Pope Francis lies in the chapel of his apartments in the Vatican, blessed by his Chamberlain, Cardinal Kevin Farrell. Dressed in red robes, wearing the white papal mitre, the coffin a simple wooden one, not the elaborate 3-layered coffin traditionally used to bury a pope. In this, his body will be carried in procession tomorrow to lie in state in St. Peter's Basilica for the 3 days leading up to Saturday's funeral. The cardinals who'll attend the funeral and then 9 days later begin to choose his successor are already arriving at the Vatican. But before the serious discussions start, they and the Church will focus on honouring the departed Pope Francis. His body will be taken from the Church of the House of St. Martha at 9 a.m. tomorrow to St. Peter's. It'll lie on public display in an open coffin for mourners to pay their respects. The funeral's at 10 a.m. on Saturday, an outdoor mass in St. Peter's Square, a ceremony greatly simplified in line with the Pope's wishes. The burial, though, is at the Santa Maria Maggiore Basilica in Rome, one of Francis's favourite churches, the first time the Pope's chosen not to be buried in the Vatican in more than 100 years. Around 3/4 of the cardinals who'll choose the next pope were themselves chosen by Pope Francis. But those who follow the Byzantine world of Vatican politics say that may not mean they want to carry on in the same direction.
When a pope is dead, it's like the children when the father is dead. Every child does what he wants, it goes his way. So the fact that about 110 cardinals are chosen by Bergoglio doesn't mean that you'll have a Pope Francis #2.
What kind of pope will we have?
The church is very split, it's very divided.
Not least on Francis's determination to give women an ever greater role in his church.
Look around the Vatican departments, or dicasteries as they call them, and you see women, both sisters and lay women, in very important roles. And also we're regularly consulted now by various Vatican departments about various aspects of the Church and the future.
Does this continue?
I do believe it will continue.
At the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, the tomb chosen by Pope Francis has been boarded up as it's being prepared to receive his coffin on Saturday. The question for the Church now is which, if any, of his reforms may soon be buried with him. James Mates, ITV News, Rome.
Around the world, millions of people have gathered to remember and mourn Pope Francis. In the Philippines, hundreds attended a mass at Manila Cathedral. Some mourners cried as they lit candles and prayed before a portrait of Francis. In Myanmar, Catholics gathered for a memorial mass in the country's biggest church in Yangon, where the Pope visited in 2017. Several items associated with the papal visit were displayed at the church entrance, including a pillow and a chair used by the pontiff. And in Buenos Aires, where the Pope was born, Argentines paid respect to Latin America's first pontiff. Mourners attended mass and signed a book of condolence. Tens of thousands of Catholics have converged on St. Peter's Square in Vatican City to pay their respects. Many had seen Pope Francis make his final and surprise public appearance there on Easter Sunday. Our correspondent Cedric Caria heard some of their thoughts and memories.
In warm spring sunshine, in the shadow of St. Peter's Basilica, thousands came together to grieve and to pray for the Pope. As church bells tolled in tribute, Vatican City hosted people from across the globe who came to mourn and pay their respects.
He wasn't discriminating for the black or for the white. Rather, he wants that unity that will bring everybody together.
Among them, 3 sisters from West Africa who hope he'll leave a lasting legacy.
Papa was insisting on making peace all over the world, and that one of the reasons he traveled up to 50 nations before his death. And we pray that his death will help us to have that peace.
For Fabio and his daughter Anna, the Pope's passing was particularly shocking. They saw him for the first time and for the last time on Easter Sunday.
We were here the day before in the Easter. We were looking at the Pope, at Francisco, and he passes in front of us. He was really tired. Dramatically, our sensation was it was really tired. It was sad for us.
For these friends on holiday from Atlanta, Georgia, witnessing this moment of history was just as significant.
You could come to Rome, you come to the Vatican anytime, but for it to be a Jubilee year and for the Pope to have passed, that's a very historic moment. I feel like this is like history to be here.
Many will remain here for the next few days, and many more are expected to join them in remembrance and to bid a fond and final farewell to a popular and much-loved Pope. Cedric Caria, ITV News at the Vatican.
Now, there are 6 candidates thought to be in the running to be the new Pope. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle from the Philippines, seen by some as representing the more progressive wing of the Church. The Italian-born Cardinal Pietro Parolin, currently serving as the Vatican Secretary of State, overseeing political and diplomatic events. Cardinal Robert Prevost, an American serving as the Vatican's prefect, which means he vets nominations for bishops around the world. Cardinal Peter Erdo from Hungary, seen as a conservative within the Church. Cardinal Matteo Zuppi from Italy, also serving as Archbishop of Bologna and appointed as special envoy by the Pope to find a path to peace for the war in Ukraine. And Cardinal Peter Turkson from Ghana, who has held several senior positions within the Vatican and was seen as a frontrunner during the last vote in 2013, which, of course, Pope Francis ultimately won. All our Europe editor James Mates is in Rome tonight. So, James, there's a lot happening, isn't there? And there's a lot that will happen in the coming days. Does this speculation actually signify anything? And also, can you explain exactly what happens?
Well, what they say about the conclave is that if you as a cardinal go in there as a pope, in other words, the favourite, you will come out a cardinal, because the favourites so often don't win. And already people are talking about Cardinal Parolin, who's the power behind the throne in the current Vatican, who's a strong favourite at the moment, but he oversaw a corruption scandal while he was in charge. Nothing to do with him, but that is already, people are saying, counting against him. And the other thing is that people, they may be looking for a unity candidate rather than someone from either the Conservative or the Liberal wings, someone to come through and unify the Church to prevent the danger of any sort of split. But none of that starts until 9 days after the funeral, when the cardinals will go into the Sistine Chapel. If you've seen the movie, it happens pretty much like that. They are sequestered, they're locked in, phones taken away, no contact at all with the outside world. One of the reasons, I think, why they tend to come to decisions a little bit quicker these days. You wait for outside for the black smoke, which comes out several times a day, and then finally the white smoke. My experience from watching a couple of these conclaves is very, very hard to tell the difference between the black smoke and the white smoke. They both look a sort of dirty grey, but experts are on hand to help you anyway. And then there's this long moment of tension, several hours, while you wait for an elderly cardinal to appear and say, "Habemus Papam," we have a pope, and then makes his announcement in Latin. So you hear lots of people saying, "What did he say? What did he say? Who is it?" It's a moment of great tension, but also of very great significance, obviously.
James Mates in Rome, thank you. Well, there is plenty more still to come in the ITV Evening News, including how Catholics across the UK are paying tribute to Pope Francis. Free morning childcare, but why are some teachers unhappy about the new school's breakfast clubs? Now, the Prime Minister does not believe trans women are women, telling ITV News a woman is an adult female. It follows last week's controversial judgment by the UK's Supreme Court that a woman is defined by biological sex. Now, the issue is proving to be increasingly toxic for the Prime Minister and indeed his party, as our political correspondent Romilly Weeks reports.
Trans rights! Now! Like the placards at the trans rights rally at the weekend, the statement "trans women are women" used to be something the Labour leader, like the majority of his party, was willing to state. But now?
Do you believe a trans woman is a woman?
Look, I think the Supreme Court has answered that question.
So you don't believe a trans woman is a woman?
Look, a woman is an adult female, and the Court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity.
The clear shift in his position comes after the Supreme Court ruling last week that under equality law, sex should be defined as biological sex and not gender. Today, the Women and Equalities Minister, Bridget Phillipson, laid out the implications to MPs.
There's now a need to ensure that this ruling is clear across a range of settings, from healthcare and prisons to sport and single-sex support groups.
Whilst also going on the attack.
For too many years, we've seen the heat dialed up on this debate by the party opposite with no real action to protect women's spaces.
I could not believe my eyes or my ears this afternoon. I know what a woman is, and I always have. Yeah. The people of this country know what a woman is. We didn't need the Supreme Court to tell us that, but this government did.
Some Labour MPs also expressed concern for what the ruling means for trans people who already feel marginalised. This campaigner told me there is now real fear.
It's been devastating to me and so many others. I know a lot of trans women who are on high alert when they leave their front door, when they walk down the street. They're already afraid of using bathrooms because they've either been approached or they've been forced out of them.
The Scottish Government, which lost the Supreme Court case, said this afternoon they accept the ruling. The Prime Minister, inspecting troops today, welcomed the clarity it brings to what's been a toxic debate. But the fight over exactly what the ramifications are for businesses, the NHS, women's sport and the trans community is not over yet. Romilly Weeks, ITV News.
A former senior police officer has been jailed for 6 years after breaking into his ex-wife's house to attack her during a suicide plan. Martin Horn, who served as a superintendent with the Met, was captured on CCTV cameras trying to smash down the property's front door. His former wife made a desperate 999 call as she escaped. And a warning that this report from Ellie Pitt contains that emergency call, which you may well find upsetting.
As a chief inspector in the police, Sharon Hayes was familiar with the justice system. But today she left court as her abuser and ex-husband was jailed. She said that during her career she'd faced aggression, but I never thought I'd face it in the sanctuary of my own home. He has totally ruined my life. I check and double-check everything I do. Martin Horn is a 73-year-old retired Metropolitan Police Superintendent. While already on bail for assaulting and suffocating Miss Hayes, he went to a DIY shop and bought tape, rope and a knife. He took his equipment, the rope and tape already cut into shorter sections, to Miss Hayes' home, where he was caught on CCTV forcing his way in. That's her screaming from the inside. As he smashes through the door, she calls the police and runs to a neighbour's house.
I'm in the street. I'm in the street running.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah.
Please. 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 Please, I'm in the street running. Please. They'll kill me. They'll kill me. They'll kill me.
In court today, the judge told Mr. Horn, in the heat of the moment, if you had got hold of her, it is impossible for me to be able to say how serious the level of harm she could have come to would have been. Horn stared at the judge, holding his hands in front of him as he was sentenced to 6 years today, to serve 3 in prison. Once an enforcer of the law, now receiving his own punishment. Ellie Pitt, ITV News at Reading Crown Court.
Donald Trump's global trade war has given a major negative shock to the world's economic outlook. That is the warning from the International Monetary Fund today. It said world economies, including the UK's, will suffer lower growth and the United States itself will be the worst affected. Our economics editor Joel Hills is in Washington, where the announcement was made. So, Joel, bad news for the UK, but also pretty bad news for Donald Trump too.
Oh, bad news all round. I mean, the full force of the trade war that President Trump has unleashed has yet to be felt, but the International Monetary Fund clear today the shock is coming. Now, Trump, of course, argues that tariffs on US imports will revive American manufacturing, pay for tax cuts and curb the influence of China. The IMF, Mary, believes that tariffs will do none of these things. Quite the contrary, it argues that the president is inflicting serious harm on the prospects and the prosperity of his own people and its trading partners of the United States, among them, of course, Britain. Now, Donald Trump inherited an economy that was on a roll. Just 3 months ago, the IMF was forecasting the US economy would grow by 2.7% in 2025, the fastest growth, as you can see there, in the G7. Now the IMF has cut its forecast for all the G7 nations and warned that tariffs have increased the risks of recession. The fund has reduced its growth forecast for the UK by 0.5%. The downgrade to the US is much bigger. The IMF called for an end to the hostilities.
Our recommendations call for prudence and improved collaboration. Let me outline some key ones. First, an obvious priority is to restore trade policy stability. The global economy needs a clear, stable, and predictable trading environment.
The IMF says the longer tariffs remain in place, the higher the likelihood that central banks will need to adjust interest rates, and that governments with high levels of debt and pretty grim growth prospects like the UK will need to raise taxes or cut spending. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is due here in Washington tomorrow. She'll be meeting with the US Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. We know the UK's hoping to cut a deal that will see tariffs lifted. We've yet to retaliate, of course, but so far it's not clear that the softly approach has won us better treatment than other countries, Mary.
OK, Joel Hills in Washington, thank you. A couple of other stories now, and here the government has told the families of the Nottingham attacks victims that the upcoming inquiry will be thorough, unsparing, and will make its findings as quickly as possible. Valdo Calacane killed Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates in 2023. The inquiry will scrutinise how the attacks happened. And 2,700 jobs at British Steel are now safe. The jobs were dependent on Scunthorpe's blast furnaces staying alight. But British Steel has now ended the redundancy consultation after the government took emergency control of the firm earlier this month. Pupils at hundreds of primary schools in England had an early start this morning as the first of the government's new breakfast clubs opened. 750 schools are taking part in a trial which is set to be rolled out across the country. But some have complained that the funding won't cover the costs involved. Here's our political reporter, Jasmine Cameron-Chaleshi.
The first day of term was dished up a little differently at this school in Bath. It was one of several being visited by the PM and his cabinet as they launched their free breakfast club scheme. Starting from today, thousands of families have access to 30 minutes of free childcare and breakfast before school.
The 750 new free breakfast clubs that are opening across England. It'll put money back in parents' pockets and it'll also give children a really great start to the school day. But this is only the beginning, so this is part of what will be a full national rollout in due course. But this gives us the opportunity to really test what works.
The initial rollout will benefit around 180,000 children across 750 schools in England. Schools will receive a one-off sum of £500 to set up the programme, followed by a further £1,099 per term. In addition, the government will give schools 60p per pupil to cover the provision of food and basic staffing costs, which will increase to 78p for children on free school meals. But some teaching unions warn the funding won't be sufficient.
I was talking to a head teacher last week who said they currently run a breakfast club. They charge around £2.40 a day for that breakfast club that's an hour before school. And when you compare that to the kind of funding levels the government are talking about, which are closer to sort of 60p per child, there's quite a big gap there.
And in this South London primary school, head teacher Victoria Shires agrees.
We've been really lucky. We've been able to rely on the goodwill of staff members here to make it possible. But absolutely the bottom line is that the government need to make sure that they're funding it properly and adequately, and so that schools aren't having to make up those shortfalls.
Some parents have welcomed the proposals.
This is not only about breakfast, it's about even helping you back to go to work.
I think it will have a brilliant impact on some parents that will need it more than others.
I believe the government has the money and they should put more money behind it, definitely.
With the scheme now underway, for many schools, the big question is whether their budgets will be able to stomach the extra demand. Jasmine Cameron-Chaleshi, ITV News, Westminster.
Well, let's return to our main story now, how the world is remembering Pope Francis following his death yesterday. Catholic congregations across the UK have been paying their own tributes. At St Mirren's Cathedral in Paisley, a Holy Mass was held in honour of the Pope. In Armagh, St Patrick's Roman Catholic Cathedral, prayers were made and a book of condolence was opened. And these are live pictures from Liverpool's Metropolitan Cathedral, where a special Mass is being held tonight in the Pope's memory. It's just one of the many ways the city and its people are choosing to honour him. As our North of England correspondent, Rachel Townsend, reports.
For youngsters to want to follow in the footsteps of a Pope takes something rather special.
He'd take good work though while he was.
He was progressive.
He was progressive, that's it.
And do you think that's why he appealed to the youth?
It definitely matters to young people because he built a bridge. He made that connection, not just to young people, but to the world.
At an academy on the outskirts of Liverpool, named after Pope Francis, pupils shared why he meant so much.
He's made a more broader community in the Catholic Church, you know, with welcoming those who live in poverty and those who feel like they're marginalised in society.
He took care of all the young people, you know, he really cared about everybody. He made everybody feel equal and taken care of. He wanted to fill the gap in the bridge of all the age groups.
And through inclusion and progression, he did connect generations. Father Peter Morgan met Pope Francis twice. They had no shared language, but soon found common ground.
He was laughing and joking in Spanish and Italian to people to my left. But when he came to me, we didn't really have a common language. So I said I was from Liverpool. He said, Napoli. And he clearly associated Liverpool as the Naples of England in some way, maybe with football, I don't know. I didn't tell him I was an Evertonian, but there we are. I looked him straight in the eye. I thought, this is the Pope I'm looking at.
In inner city Liverpool, Roman Catholics told me why the church needed his leadership.
He was a pope for the people, and he took everybody under his wings.
How will you remember Pope Francis?
By his smile. Anytime I see his picture, the way he smiles, and if he smiles, you can read his heart. He meant good for everyone.
Pope Francis wanted people to walk together, to listen together. There is real hope among Catholics that we are perhaps a step closer. Rachel Townsend, ITV News, Liverpool.
And that's all for now. Tom will have the latest live from the Vatican at 10:30, but from me in the evening news team. Bye-bye.